Now we're going to review the second half of our quadratics unit. So the first half we looked at a lot of graphing, standard form and vertex form, and we looked at solving two ways, by the quadratic formula, which works every single time, and by factoring. And factoring is not every equation is factorable, but we do have several different methods we can use for factoring. Then in our second half, we looked at completing the square and doing things on our calculator. So let's start by reviewing imaginary numbers. First, I want to simplify I to the 13th. Now remember, I squared equals the square root, I squared equals -1, which means that I equals the square root of -1, right? Then anytime we have a negative under our radical, we put the I on the outside. Okay, whenever we come to simplify I to a power, we always divide the power by 4, and whatever the remainder is going to be one of 4 options. You're either going to have a remainder of 0, and I to the 0 power is just 1. You'll have a remainder of 1. Anything to the first power is itself, so it's just I. I squared, that was our definition, is -1. And then I cubed is a mix of I to the first times I squared, which would give us -I. So if we do 13 divided by 4, 13 divided by 4 is 3 with a remainder of 1. 3 times 4 is 12. 12 plus 1 gives you 13. So I to the first is just I. Then simplify the square root of negative numbers. So simplifying the square root of -25. Well, as soon as you see that negative, we can take it apart and make -1 times 25. Well, the square root of 25 is 5. The square root of -1 is I. And then you put your plus or minus on the outside. The square root of -20. Right, same thing. I've got -1, 20. That -1 is going to let me put an I on the outside. But 20 is not a perfect square. I cannot take the square root of 20 and get an integer. So I'm going to make a factor tree. So I've got 2 and 10. 10 breaks into 2 and 5. I've got 2 2's that I can circle. So that means I'm going to take 1 2 and put it on the outside, and the 5 is left on the inside. So that leaves me with 2I root 5, and then don't forget your plus or minus on the outside. Completing the square. Remember, the quadratic formula works every single time. Completing the square works every single time, but you kind of want to be choosy and picky about when you use it. It'll work best if you've got an A equals 1, or it's easily, you can easily manipulate it to get A of 1, and if your B is even, right? Because we want to try to avoid fractions. They get kind of messy, and we can always use a quadratic formula if we're going to have fractions. So for this one, my A is 1, and my B is -6. I don't have any other x terms over there, so my B is even, so I can do completing the square. The first thing I need to do is get my x's on one side and my constant on the other. So I'm going to add the 11 over. So we've got x squared minus 6x plus the box. 2 plus 11, 13, plus that same box. To pick what goes in the box, b divided by 2 squared. Half of b is -3, squared is 9. So I'm going to add 9. Then I've got x squared, x minus 3 in parentheses, squared, equals, and then 13 plus 9 gives us 22. To solve for x, I'm going to take the square root. So I get x minus 3 equals, square root of 22 is not a perfect square. The only factors are 2 and 11, so I can't take anything out. So I'm just going to leave it as plus or minus 22. Then I'm going to add 3. So that x equals 3 plus or minus root 22. I can't simplify it anymore because of that radical. If I got rid of the radical, I could do 3 plus a number and then 3 minus a number and keep going. But this is where I have to stop. For the second one, I've got 3x squared plus 12x minus 12. Right now, my a is not 1. But all of my terms are divisible by 3. So I can just take a second to get rid of that a and get down to x squared plus 4x equals -4. Now my a is 1, my b is even, so completing the square is a good fit. So I'm going to add in my boxes. I've already got the x's on one side and the constant on the other. So now I'm going to take half of b and square it. So half of 4 is 2, squared is 4. Add 4 to both sides. Then I've got x plus 2 squared. Remember, you always take half of b and put it in your parentheses. And negative 4 plus 4 is just 0. No positive, no negative, because it's just 0. Take the square root, and I get x plus 2. Square root of 0 is 0. It's a great number to work with. And I'm going to subtract 2. So x equals negative 2. Remember, whenever you have a quadratic, you can have no solutions, right, or two imaginary solutions. You can have one solution or two solutions. So the first one I've got 2 because of that plus or minus. The second one I've only got one solution. We look at different kind of word problems. Okay, the height of a triangle is 6 more than twice the base. If the area is 108 square inches, find the base and the height of the triangle. So if I've got this triangle, remember your height drops straight down to make that right angle. There's my height, there's my base. Now the area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. But I cannot solve for a variable if I have more than one. So I've got to rewrite one of the variables in terms of the other. So for this one, I've got the height is 6 more than twice the base, which means I can rewrite the height as 6 more than 2b. So I say 2b plus 6. Now I've got everything with b's in it, so I can plug it in and write my equation. So I can say 1/2 times my base b times my height, which is 2b plus 6, has to equal 108. So now I've got b times 2b, 2b squared, b times 6 plus 6b equals 108 times 2, 216. Okay? Because you're completing the square before, let's practice factoring on this one. So I'm going to set it equal to 0. 2b squared plus 6b minus 216 equals 0. Okay. I have a GCF. Always look for your GCF, which is 2. Take a 2 out. So I've got b squared plus 3b minus 108. Now I want to find two numbers that multiply to negative 108 but add to 3. So multiply to 108, add to 3. I know that 12 and 9 would give me 108, and there's 3 between them. So I'm going to have 12 and a 9. And to multiply to a negative but add to a positive, my 9 has to be negative. My next step to solve is just to set them equal to 0, which means change their signs. So I've got a negative 12 and a positive 9. If I go back to my problem, I know that my base is just b, and b can't be a negative number, so negative 12 is out. So my base is 9 inches. If my base is 9, my height is 6 more than twice the base. So twice the base is 18. 18 plus 6 gives us 24. For the next type of word problem we looked at consecutive integers. Okay, so for 3 consecutive positive multiples of 3. Alright, so remember, anytime you have consecutive integers, the first one's x. Multiples of 3 means they go up by 3 each time, and I want 3 of them. So the second one would be x plus 3, and the next one will be 3 more than that, which is x plus 6. I know that I want it to be positive, so we'll look at the positive answers once we solve. Okay, so I have 3 consecutive positive multiples of 3, and the product of the first two is 3 more than 7 times the third. I want to find the largest integer. Okay, so the product of the first two is, there's my equal sign, it is. On the left side, the product of the first two would be x times x plus 3. And on the right side, 3 more than 7 times the third. So my third is x plus 6, so 7 times x plus 6 plus 3. And now I want to solve. So I'm going to distribute my x, get x squared plus 3x, distribute my 7, 7x plus 42, and go ahead and combine to get x squared plus 3x equals 7x plus 45. Alright, now we've got several ways of solving. I'm going to go ahead and get my x's on the same side, so I'm going to subtract x over. So we get x squared minus 4x equals 45. My a is 1, my b is even, so we can't complete the square. So from here, I've got x squared minus 4x plus the box equals 45 plus the box. b over 2 squared is 2 squared, which is 4. So then this side I can rewrite as x minus 2 squared, and then 45 plus 4 gives us 49. Now to solve, I'm going to take the square root. Come on this side, I've got x minus 2 equals 7, positive or negative 7. So then I'm going to add 2. So x equals 2 plus or minus 7. Now that I have no radicals, I can break it apart. I'm going to have a 2 plus 7 and a 2 minus 7. 2 plus 7 is 9, 2 minus 7 is negative 5. Both are odd, but I want positive, so the negative 5's out. So my first term x is 9. It wants to find the largest integer, so I'm just going to do 9 plus 6, which means the largest is 15. So for our last example, we're going to use our calculator. So I've got this problem with a bunch of words, but all I care about is this equation. Negative 16t, and that should be squared, plus 24t plus 7. So I'm going to go to my calculator and type it in. Scooch this down. So I'm going to go to y equals, and I've got negative 16, my variable is below mode, and squared is above log, plus 24x plus 7. I'm going to look at my graph. Alright, I've got this parabola, it's always going to be upside down. Alright, now I want to use this equation to find the time it takes a diver to break the water. Then I want to see how high the diver jumps and when the diver reaches 5 feet above the water. So to begin with, I want to see when it breaks the water. Well, right down here is where it's going to hit the ground, right? That's when height is 0. So I'm going to find my 0. So I'm going to go second trace, number 2. I need to do a left bound and a right bound. So I'm going to get my cursor on the left side of that intercept and on the right side and tell it to guess. So my intercept is at 1.75. And remember, e to the negative 12 just means 0. It means it's a lot of decimal places away. So I've got 1.75 seconds. Okay, I want to know how high, that's a y value, how high the diver jumps. I'm going to find the maximum. I'm going to go back to my calculator, go to that calc menu, and go down to maximum. I want to do left bound and right bound. So remember, you can also type in values instead of scrolling. So I know that 0 is on the left side of my max. So I'll type 0, enter. And then I know that, let's see, 3 is definitely on the right side. So I'll type in 3 and tell it to guess. So my max is at 0.7516. Alright, so remember, if it's asking you for how high, that's talking about the y value of your max. So the highest was 16 feet. And then I want to know when the diver reaches 5 feet above the water. 5 feet is a y value, so I'm going to go back to my calculator to y2 and type in that y value 5. And then I'm going to look for the intersection. Alright, so remember, if we look back at the original equation, it was a plus 7 for my y-intercept, which means the diver started above 5 feet, jumped up, and then came back down. So I want to know what that time is right there. So I'm going to find the intersection by going to second trace, number 5, and I'm going to scroll over towards it because I only want that intersection, right? Just to tell your calculator which one you want and tell it to guess. And then it says 1.58 and 5. So at 1.58 seconds, reaches 5 feet above the water.